story, let's begin. The water's fine, come on, dive in. The future's here, it's right before your eyes. Step by step, you're on your way. Welcome to a brighter day.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about marketing technology, what's new and what works. We've had a lot of questions about this. Everybody's wondering, is Facebook out? Is Google Plus in? What tools should I be using and so on. And there's a lot of different things that have changed in the last little while. So we do this, we'll probably have this class once a year just to talk about what has changed. So please do two things. First of all, make sure that you have a pen. We're going to cover a lot of information really quickly, and unless you write down things on your to-do list or schedule things for yourself to do, then you're wasting your time in this class, because unless you actually apply some of what we're talking about, it really doesn't do you a whole lot of good. So make sure you have a pen and something to write on. Also, you want to make sure that your cell phone is turned off. You want to make sure you eliminate distractions, because multitasking is overrated. All right, so I am Paula Williams.
This is John Williams.
And we are ABCI, Aviation Business Consultants International. We do marketing exclusively for aviation companies. It's an interesting market, and we really enjoy working with it. So part of the reason that we're talking about technology today, and a really good example of that, is the difference between some of the airplanes that John started flying years ago and the one that I learned to fly in. This is November 6208 Charlie, my favorite airplane on the planet. Now, Charlie has what we call a Garmin G1000 and integrated autopilot and all kinds of technology that wasn't around when John started flying. Is that right?
Yeah, I started flying a 67 model 172, which was really, really basic six-pack. And this thing has got all glass panel. You can pre-program your flight, and once you've taken off, you, according to Cessna, you engage in pitch and roll mode, and then you can turn the direction you want to go with the knob, and once you're cleared to go on course, you hit the nav button and it'll navigate you all the way through. It'll fly approaches, it'll fly missed approaches, it'll fly holding patterns. It'll do anything you want with very little input from you.
Exactly. But all of that technology is not as easy to use as you would think. In fact, even though John has lots of hours and lots of different airplanes, he had to go to school at the Cessna factory for 2 days, 3 days? 3 days before they would let him fly home with this airplane.
Well, and the 3 days was all ground school, and then there was a complete full day of flying. Since I'm instrument rated, we did instrument approaches as well as VFR flying and acceptance test flight and so on. But it was a solid week of education on avionics and how it works and so on.
Right. So this is a good example of how technology has changed in aviation, and of course. Similarly, technology has changed a lot in the marketing that we do. The basic pilot skills that John has from, years of flying still help him a lot. He's still a much better pilot than I am, even though I started flying using all of this technology. So all of those skills still apply, but you have to apply them in a slightly different way as the technology changes. So, one of our key premises of our business is no random acts of marketing. And one of the things that happens a lot with technology and with social media is that people start just doing stuff because they can, and because the tools are so cool and they're so much fun. So, one of the things that we really have to be careful with when we start exploring technology is not to just use it because it's there. You really want to make sure that you are using it for a reason, and just because you have a bigger toolbox doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use everything in the toolbox for every single job. So our recommendations, and you want to keep these in mind as we're going through this program, are to examine your sales and marketing process, investigate your top 10 most wanted customers and top 10 competitors, and see what they are doing, and see what you want to accomplish with those folks, and see if that tool is really appropriate for you. You want to decide if a social media or marketing technology tool is going to help you accomplish a specific objective, and you want to work that activity into your weekly routine. So a lot of people say, well, social media is such a waste of time. It depends on what you use it for. Your telephone can be such a waste of time. If you're spending all day talking to your kids or talking to your friends or whatever without actually having an objective or something in mind. So building relationships takes time, and whether you do that in person or on the phone or by social media. So it's just a question of whether the tools are going to help you or hurt you, right, and get in your way. Okay, so the next few slides are going to be including information from our 2014 survey of aviation professionals about their use of social media. Now, there's a lot of data out there about different demographics that use different social media, but there was nothing out there specifically about the aviation market, and we are odd. As a market, aviation people tend to be slower adapters of certain technology, and we also tend to have a slightly different demographic than the rest of the world. So we want to look at just the aviation industry, and we'll be doing that in the next few slides. So, first one, which of the following best describes your company? And here we can kind of break it down, and you can see, is this information going to apply to me? And, you can see which categories these fall into. Within aviation, we've got a lot of different categories, and some of these, if you wanted to divide this into two groups, we've got the B2C and the B2B. So B2C being business to consumer, and, that's typically what we think of when we look at social media. Those are the things that have been most often associated with selling directly to customers, because it's human beings on social media, not necessarily executives on some of them. So these are the organizations that we would consider kind of B2C. They sell directly to consumers, or both. FBOs and charter organizations may do some B2B work as well. So I would say more than half of our respondents for our survey were B2C, and but we did have a pretty good spread, or pretty good separation, a pretty good representation among the aviation companies. So, and then also within those companies, which of the following best describes your role? It's often been thought that people who use social media are the entry-level folks. But what we found in our survey was that the founders and C-level execs were the biggest group that answered our survey, which is a big change from 2 or 3 years ago, when it was all kind of the entry-level folks and the explorers and new folks and kids who were messing with social media, and the founders and C-level executives thought that it was a waste of time. The next biggest group, of course, is marketing professionals, and we would expect those folks to be using social media and to be answering surveys, so that's not surprising. Also had pilots, engineers, sales professionals, and so on. We had a category called Other. So if none of those fit you, you could respond with that and put in whatever you liked. And we had all kinds of things: state aviation office, an Uber driver, or an airport pickup taxi service, airline, helicopter pilot, CFII, a couple of aviation associations, and one that's a full charter aviation company. So they would fit into several of those categories. So they jumped out and said Other. So pretty good mix again. And then first question was, how often do you log into any social media network? This was a surprise here. More than once a day. And again, these are C-level executives, and this is the aviation industry. We can't get much more specific than that. So the question we're often asked is, does social media work in the aviation industry? The data here suggests that any information to the contrary is not supported. So There may be some folks who are not using social media at all, but not very many of them are using social media very little. Most of these people are using it a lot. And this is more than we expected. Okay, so which networks are they using? Last week we did an in-depth session on LinkedIn, and the reason for that is because you look at these two numbers. This is 80% of the people who responded to our survey, more than 80%, get into LinkedIn for their personal use weekly or more or daily or more. That's about split in half. That's a lot more than we expected. I knew people were using LinkedIn. I know that it's probably the most respected social media, but I didn't realize that people were getting in that often. A couple of years ago, it was monthly or seldom. And a lot of these C-level executives didn't really see the need for LinkedIn because it was kind of seen as a resume service. But now people are using it for everything, to connect with partners and subcontractors and find customers and all kinds of things. So that was surprising. Another surprise was Facebook. Kind of split here. People love it or they hate it. There's not much in the middle. Again, years ago, I would say Facebook, even if people were using it, they wouldn't admit to it. Especially in the aviation industry, people like to think of themselves as more serious than that. So, this is showing that Facebook is kind of growing up and becoming more mainstream. Twitter, we have an opportunity there. I think there's a lot of people that could be using Twitter that are not. Again, I think there are some things that we could be doing, and we're going to get into some examples of things that we can do with each of these networks that people may not have thought of. And John, you had a comment that, a lot of people just don't know what to do with Twitter. It's not something that's as easy or intuitive.
Yeah, that's probably why it's not being used. They don't know how to use it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense, and that's probably true. This, I think, is tragic, that YouTube is used so little. I think it's one of the very best media for marketing and also for learning anything. Our webinars are, the short versions are on YouTube. If you want to learn how to do pretty much anything with any technology tool or see a demonstration from any product or anything like that, YouTube is a great place to go. And these four, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, and Reddit, were not used by most of our respondents, or seldom used or not at all by most of our respondents for their personal use. So the numbers are one thing, and your personal experience may be another. So again, you can prove anything you want with statistics. What I think is the best use of this table is to see, of the aviation industry, here are the places that my customers are the most likely to be spending their time. And then you take the likelihood, and then you have to basically devise an experiment to see if your top 10 customers fit into the statistics that we're seeing here. But it gives you a good place to start, so that you start with generalizations and you get more and more and more specific, just to save time. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about marketing use as opposed to personal use. How often do you update these social networks for marketing purposes, not necessarily for personal purposes? And here, we talked about this last week in a lot more depth. Although a lot of people are using LinkedIn for personal use very, very often, the majority of companies don't use it for marketing. Now, that could be a perception thing. They say, well, you shouldn't be marketing on LinkedIn. It's not really that kind of a platform. But if you consider all of the marketing activities like building relationships, staying in touch with past customers and so on, I think those are marketing, very legitimate marketing activities, and they should be taking place on LinkedIn. You look at Facebook, again, you've got that split. Not many people in the middle, not many people on the fence about Facebook. They're either using it a lot or not at all. So that's a good bit of information there. Facebook has, in the last year, provided a lot better data for their ad networks and other things. So you can do lookalike audiences, and you can do better segmenting of your ads. So you can target ads toward men 35 and older in the upper Midwest states who have an interest in, who have a pilot's license, those kinds of things. You can get that specific, which really kind of helps you save some money on your advertising. So Facebook is good for that reason, and there's lots of things you can do with it. Twitter, most people are using it seldom or never for marketing, and I think that's unfortunate, because there's a lot of research, a lot of marketing research that you can do that people spend a lot of money on that you can get for free from Twitter. And also it's great for events, which we're going to talk about later in this program. So I think there's an opportunity there. And YouTube, like we said, this is one of the very best opportunities for marketing. Everybody uses it a lot personally, but they're not doing a lot of marketing here.
And that's probably because they don't understand the ramifications of not doing it, and they don't know how to integrate it to get the maximum benefit.
Right. But aviation people are visual people. So, if you really want to demonstrate a product, you really need to show people how it works rather than tell them. So, you could write until you're blue in the face and not get the same impact that you get from showing people a good product demo on YouTube. And we'll talk more about that momentarily. Now, the rest of these, I see this as an opportunity. Most people are not advertising or not marketing using these platforms, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram. And we'll talk about some opportunities there. Since there's not a lot of people doing marketing, you kind of want to do what other people are not. There's an opportunity there that you could take advantage of, because there's a lot of people who are on Google+, Pinterest, and Instagram who have specific user groups and communities that you can get into where nobody is doing any marketing. So, if you're the only one in your field that is in that space, then you have kind of a nice little captive audience there. Great. So, plan changes in social media. This is another question on the form that we ask people to just fill in a blank. What are your planned changes in social media over the next year? And, people wrote in whatever they wanted. And we basically discovered a trend. See if you can identify what that trend is. Basically, they're using the words increased and more all the time. Nobody's saying we're going to do less social media. We're going to do less Facebook. We're going to get out of Instagram or anything like that. We've been wasting our time on this, and we're not going to do that anymore. That's not what we're hearing. What we're hearing is we want to increase different pieces and parts of a social media platform. So these are smart people, and they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't working for them. So this is a pretty telling bit of information there. So any questions about the survey?
Yeah, there were a couple. Let's see. How many different social media are available to be used? What are they? And which ones are most used by aviation? Okay.
That's 3 questions. So We'll start with the first one. How many social media are there? I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that. There's hundreds, thousands, maybe millions. A lot of aviation publications have their own forums, which kind of border on being social media. People can put their profile out on an Aviation Week forum as an example, and then comment on articles. And is that really a social media? I don't know. We didn't go to the effort of defining what that is or isn't. And we really didn't go to any effort beyond, identifying the ones that are most used. So the second question was, what are they? Okay, well, we picked 8. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, Pinterest, and Instagram. And I would say, if you are involved in aviation, Those are the 8 that you want to be concerned with. There may be others that people have great success with, but there are not enough of them for us to devote the time to in this session.
You could.